Do you struggle with processing your emotions and maybe even don't know how to process emotions? Perhaps you were taught that emotions were meant to be pushed aside and not felt or ignored. Well, in this video, I'm going to give you some steps to take to process your emotions so that you can achieve emotional sobriety or emotional freedom. So if you're all set to learn what these steps are, let's go ahead and dive on in. Hey Soul Surfers, welcome back to the channel. If you are new here and have not yet subscribed, we would love to have you join our community. Just click the subscribe button, and if you would like to know when new content is posted, you can click the notification bell. And just like anything on this channel, if you enjoy what you see, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Today we are talking about how to process emotions. This is a new technique that I learned, and I have found it so helpful, efficient, and one of the quickest ways to process my emotions. Now, I used to be somebody who would not feel my emotions. I would do everything in my power not to feel the pain or any emotions that felt painful. I would use techniques like eating, drinking, other forms of distraction or dissociation, as they call it, anything to not feel my feelings. And I learned not to feel my feelings growing up because when I did feel my feelings, it was often met with backlash, or I was berated or pretty much told not to feel my feelings, that was not normal, that's not what we do, we just ignore them and do everything besides feel them. Now, this did not just come from my childhood. This also came from society, because society teaches us not to feel our feelings either. They teach us to do everything to distract ourselves, to keep from feeling that emotion. We're supposed to be robots. We're supposed to just push through the pain and ignore it. Well, doing that is a recipe for disaster and emotional unfulfillment. It also creates a lot of people who are emotionally reactive and not emotionally free. Now, emotions are meant to be felt. They are meant to be processed and go through and flow through our system, just like everything else. Everything is energy and it all is supposed to flow. So when we don't feel our feelings and we stuff them or hide from them or push them away, what we're doing is stopping the flow of energy. Now, because we've learned not to feel our emotions, our egos have decided that emotions are bad. They're bad, especially the ones that do not feel good. But even also some of the ones that do feel good. Like, for example, with happiness, sometimes our ego will try to keep us from feeling happy because if we felt happiness in the past, it oftentimes was met with pain at some point. So we can't get comfortable in the happiness. Our ego remembers the time where things were going very well, but then all of a sudden, as they say, the other shoe dropped and that happiness was gone. Now, the trouble with this is that the happiness was coming from outside of us. So we were attributing happiness to something outside of ourselves. Maybe it was money, maybe it was a relationship or friendships, maybe it was a job that we had. But when we place our happiness outside of ourselves, that's where we set ourselves up for future pain and repetition. And as we continue to create this pattern, our ego starts to say, well, happiness is not good because it always ends in pain, which is not true. It's true for the ego because that was the experience, but once we turn that happiness and find it within ourselves, we realize we don't have to worry about whether or not something in our external environment is going to go away because we always feel happy. All right, so let's move on to the next part of the video where we talk about how to feel your feelings. Now, this also is a really good way to validate your inner child. If you're familiar or you resonate with the inner child concept, this is a really great exercise for your inner child to be heard. And this isn't just like a one-time exercise. This actually is something that I plan to continue to do as I go along. You can also use this process for past experiences that come up for review, because as you're doing shadow work or trauma healing or inner child work, past memories may come back up that have not been processed by the psyche or by your inner child or emotionally. So you can use this process to validate those experiences as well, but also in the present moment as new emotions and feelings come up to be processed. All right, so step one is to acknowledge your feeling. So what I started doing was noticing, sometimes I would start with a thought. If a negative thought came into my mind, I would hear it and I would ask myself, where did this thought come from? What is behind this? And so acknowledging that that thought came from somewhere and that there may be some emotion tied to it helped me start the process. This also doesn't have to be a thought. You could have just a feeling. Sometimes I would just get feelings in my stomach or in like my solar plexus area, if you're familiar with the chakras. So anytime I felt like a feeling there, no matter what it was, I would acknowledge it. When you start doing this process, I feel like it's very important to acknowledge every feeling that you feel. You may come to find out that it's not really related to anything and, maybe you're just hungry or something like that. But at the beginning, I started doing this for every feeling that I felt in my body and be like, where is this coming from? So the first step is to acknowledge that there is a feeling present, whether or not you know what it is yet, because that'll be another part of the process. Step two in the process is anytime you're feeling a feeling, to stop what you're doing completely and give yourself your full attention. At one point when I started doing this, I would be typing on my keyboard and be like, okay, I'm feeling something, but I realized that was a pattern I was repeating from my past. I wasn't giving myself my full attention. And the reason I say that this is like a recreation of something from my past is that oftentimes in my past, I didn't feel that I was given the full attention by the people that I loved or the people that I wanted attention from. So it's very important to stop what you're doing. If you're in the middle of something, put it down, because you are important. You are completely worth your own full undivided attention. If you do not give yourself your full undivided attention, nobody else will, because what you're projecting out is that you're not even worth your own time, which is not true. You are so worth your own time. So stopping everything that you're doing and not distracting yourself from acknowledging and feeling the feeling is step number two. Step number three, you can start to investigate where this feeling is coming from. Now, sometimes feelings come up and they don't have a story attached. In fact, having a story attached is not necessary. And I think a lot of times the ego wants to have a story attached. It makes it easier to let go if it understands where things are coming from, because that's what the ego does. It likes to analyze things and understand, but it's not necessary to know where it's coming from. So this is something I learned as I was investigating. I did find it easier sometimes when I could associate the feeling with where it was coming from, but it did not impede the process if I didn't have a story attached to it. So when I investigate my feeling, what I do is talk to it. I actually talk to it and say, where is this coming from? Do you have something to say? Where, what's going on? Kind of like you would talk to a child. How are you feeling? What's going on? What is this bringing up for you? There's a lot of questions or ways you can ask it. And I literally do talk to myself. I talk myself through it and ask these questions. And sometimes when I talk through this, I get to the real root of it, because a lot of times whatever's going on externally doesn't actually have to do with the situation we think it does. A lot of times it has to come with something from our past, usually from our childhood, maybe not necessarily, but typically that's what it all boils down to, is something from our past that we haven't processed. Now, sometimes a feeling would come up for me and it wouldn't even have a trigger. There wouldn't be anything going on. It would just come up because, like I said, that's part of the shadow work and inner child work process, is that as you start this process and this healing process, things are just going to come up because the energy is starting to flow again. So this is where you may not have a story attached. So I just talk through it and I just hold space for my inner child or myself or my feeling and let it say what it has to say. And it's kind of amazing what it has to say. Now, if you like to journal, you can journal at this point and write it out. I like to talk it out. That works best for me. But if you prefer to journal or have some other method for letting your feelings speak, by all means, please do what resonates for you, because that's going to be the best way to heal this. And at this part of the process, it's very important not to judge what is being said. It may be a little bit challenging, but just letting the words come out, whatever they are, and just be. Sometimes you'll find some very limiting beliefs in this process as well. So this is a very therapeutic piece of the puzzle. Now, the next step, regardless if you have a story attached or the feeling is just there, is to tell the feeling, you are valid. I love you no matter how you feel. I talk to my inner child. It's my inner child usually that has something to say, but sometimes it's just a feeling, like I said. And so whatever resonates for you, but just even telling the feeling, you are valid. You are allowed to feel however you feel. And I love you regardless of what you're feeling. What's going on here is you're taking this feeling and transmuting it into a loving energy instead of a negative, dark energy where there's judgment or perhaps shame or guilt or any other of those more dense, lower vibrational feelings and energies. Sometimes at this point too, I will hug myself. I'll wrap my arms around myself and give myself a hug, and it feels so therapeutic. It sounds, well, it doesn't even matter how it sounds. It works for me, so I'm here to share my experience and the things that work. If it resonates with you, fantastic. If it doesn't, you don't have to do it. The next step of the process is to feel the feeling. Allow the feeling to pass through, because that's how it's going to come out of your body. As they say, the issues are in our tissues. So we store trauma and negative emotions that we have repressed or suppressed in our cells. So because the energy has to go somewhere. And since we haven't processed it, it gets trapped in our body. So by allowing this energy to flow through and manifest however it does, sometimes for me it manifests as tears. Actually, a lot of times that's what it manifests as. But whatever you experience is valid. I'm going to validate you right now on this part. Anything you experience and process and how you process it is valid, okay? So don't get stuck on, there were no tears. That's okay. Just feeling the feeling, acknowledging it, telling it you love it, and just letting it pass through until it subsides is the perfect way to get it flowing and out of your physical being. This will also help cleanse your energy body as well. And the final step that I do when I process my emotions is I take myself to the mirror and I do the I am enough guided exercise. And I'll link that here for you. It's a short 5-minute guided exercise that I created. So I do that. I stand in front of my mirror, look in myself in the eyes, and tell myself, you are enough, or I am enough, or both. You can do both. The exercise says I am enough, but you can say you are enough too. Even just saying that in the moment, and you don't have to be in front of a mirror. It's just way more effective if you do it in front of the mirror looking at yourself. But you can just affirm to yourself, I am enough. I am enough. And keep telling yourself that over and over, because that's going to replace the energy that you just transmuted with a new belief system and a new feeling. And that is that you are enough. Those are the steps to take to process your emotions. So if you're ready to find emotional freedom, be less reactive, feel more balanced and more in control of yourself and your emotions in your life, go ahead and follow these steps and let me know what you think. All right, Soul Surfers, thank you so much for joining me for today's video. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. You can also share it with your friends if you think that they would find value in this as well. Also, if you've tried this process and are finding it beneficial, go ahead and leave a comment in the box below to let other Soul Surfers know the benefits of this process. Thanks again for joining me, and I will see you all in the next video.